Hey guys, Tony here. Welcome back. In today's video, just a quick educational topic on PE ratios and how we use them to determine if a company is properly valued or not. This is critical information if you are a new trader, and a lot of people don't realize that there are actually two PE ratios as you're looking at stocks. I want to make sure that you're aware of both of them and understand how they relate to each other. The trailing 12-month PE ratio and the forward PE ratio. PE ratios came up this week in several questions I was helping folks with as we were looking at some stocks and trying to determine if they were properly valued or overvalued, and AMD is one good example we can look at before we dive into the subject matter. You can see here at the top of this box, AMD in the green there has a price of $181.32. And the person that I was trying to help noticed that down in the left-hand corner of the box, the PE ratio was 345. And he said, surely, Tony, this must be an overvalued company. That is a really high PE ratio. And I said, now hold on there, partner. We got to also consider the forward PE ratio, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of that box. So in this video, we're going to talk about those two PE ratios, the trailing 12-month PE ratio, which is 345 for AMD, and the forward PE ratio of 50 for AMD, and discuss how there could possibly be such a wide discrepancy between the two PE ratios. And hopefully, if you are a new trader and confused about the whole PE ratio thing, this will help it make a little more sense to you. Let's get right into it. So let's get the textbook definition out of the way. We'll read this together, and then I will walk you through a real-life example to drive this home. And hopefully it will all make sense to you when we're done. The price-to-earnings ratio, or the PE ratio for short, measures a company's share price relative to its earnings per share. The PE ratio helps assess the relative value of a company's stock, and it's something that we often use. I use it almost every day. It's handy for comparing a company's valuation against its historical performance and against other companies within the same industry or the overall market. We use PE ratios to evaluate profitable companies. Now, you might see some websites that report negative PE ratios, but that is not common, and I don't typically use PE ratios on non-profitable companies. But whether you're using your broker's website, something like Yahoo Finance, or a tool like I have up on the screen here, which is from stockanalysis.com, you can go to the historical analysis page for your stock and look up the history of its PE ratio. And so I have AMD pulled up here. You can see the years up here at the top of the screen. And if you look down there in the second row, we have the whole history of PE ratios for AMD. And we can see in the far left column, the current PE ratio is 338.91. We're going to talk about the trailing 12 months PE ratio first. That means we need to grab the earnings for the last 4 quarters for AMD. That would be 42 cents, 18 cents, 2 cents, and -9 cents. The next thing we're going to do is add all of those up. That comes to trailing 12 months earnings of 52 cents. Let's refresh our numbers here on AMD. Looking at the top, remember the price is $181.32. We're going to then take that price and divide it by that earnings that we just added up, and we get a PE ratio of 348, which is essentially what it is showing here in the bottom left of the screen for the TTM, or trailing 12 months PE ratio. So that's pretty straightforward. The trailing 12 months PE ratio, just take the last 4 quarters of earnings, add them up, take the price, divide that by the earnings. There you go, your trailing 12 months PE ratio. Where people get confused often, though, is when we're looking at the forward PE ratio. One common question is, well, how forward is it? It's the same as the trailing, except it's the other direction. So we need to look at the next 4 quarters. What is the expected earnings over the next year for that company? And how would you know that? You would go to a website like Yahoo Finance or stockanalysis.com, or your broker, or Barron's, and look up what are the analysts forecasting for earnings for that stock over the next year. From stockanalysis.com here, I have the analyst forecast for AMD pulled up, and we can see the box here, earnings per share by year, and towards the right-hand side of the screen, they have earnings forecast estimated all the way out through 2027. But for the forward PE ratio, we just want to look at this coming year, 2024. So when we intersect those two lines, we can see that the expected earnings in 2024 for AMD is $3.66. So we're going to use that same basic math, the price divided by the earnings. And we know that the price of AMD, again, $181.32. We have the annual earnings for 2024 forecasted at $3.66. So we divide 181.31, 181.32, what have you, divided by 366, and we get a forward PE ratio of 49.54. You can see that is essentially what they have in the bottom right-hand corner of this box of 50.05, the forward PE ratio. All right, so now you know how both of those are calculated. If you need to rewind and watch it again, feel free to do that. But we're gonna keep moving forward in this video to respect your time. The next question you might ask if you're a new investor, and this is not a topic that you're familiar with, is why is there such a big discrepancy between the trailing 12 months PE ratio for AMD and the forward PE ratio? And that is a great question. Let's wrap this video up by tackling that. To get the answer to that question, we're going to go back to this screen that shows the historical earnings for AMD and the analyst forecast for future years of earnings. And we're going to look at last year, 2023, and this current upcoming year, 2024. And I want you to notice the earnings per share. In 2023, AMD booked 53 cents earnings per share for the entire year. For the forward year, 2024, analysts are forecasting $3.66. And if you look right below that at the earnings per share growth, that is a growth in earnings of 590% from 2023 to 2024. Remember, we're taking the same price, $181.32 for AMD, the current price, but we're dividing it by two different numbers, either 52, 53 cents if we're looking at the trailing 12-month PE ratio, or $3.66 if we are looking at the forward PE ratio. And because that number that we're dividing by is such a big difference in quantity, you're going to get a different result for the TTM PE ratio or the forward PE ratio. Now you might be asking yourself, how do analysts know what to forecast for the next year or coming years? Where do they come up with that $3.66? Often that comes from company guidance given out during a quarterly earnings call. And you can see towards the end of 2023, around end of October, this huge movement up in the price of AMD. I haven't researched it, but I think it's a safe bet that in this earnings call, AMD gave forward guidance saying, hey, we forecast that over the next year, we're going to have a big increase in revenue and or a big increase in the earnings for our company. And so analysts go through and they update and upgrade their earnings forecast, and that sets off a massive uptick in the price. Because remember, the price of a stock is what people are willing to pay for future earnings. And if those future earnings get upgraded by the company, then the value of the company increases. And so you can expect that the price of a stock is going to go up. By the same measure, if a company says, hey, we're going to have a worse year next year, we're going to downgrade our revenue and earnings expectations, you're going to see the price of a stock immediately start reacting to that forward forecast from the company. And if the company's not giving out guidance, like sometimes happens, or we don't hear from the companies, the analysts are left on their own to make their own assumptions, their own estimates. And that might be upsetting to investors when analysts are making up their own numbers, their own estimates. But really, it's incumbent on the company to give guidance. And if they don't, then we have to make our own best estimates. And when Wall Street is deciding what they are willing to pay for a stock, and make no mistake about it, they are the ones with the big money who drive the price of a stock. If management's not giving guidance, they're going to go with the guidance from the professionals, the professional analysts on Wall Street who do this every day for a job. So to wrap up this video, going back to AMD one last time, which PE ratio is the right one to look at when you're trying to decide if the price is overvalued or not? Clearly, if AMD's earnings were 52 cents, then the PE ratio of 345 would indicate that $181 per share is wildly overpriced. But we know that we expect in 2024, AMD is going to deliver $3.66 total earnings for the year, making the PE ratio a much more reasonable 50. So what we want to be looking at in the case of AMD is the forward PE ratio. 50 is a very reasonable PE ratio for a high growth company like AMD. So I would say that the stock is aggressive, but still fairly valued at $181. And you might ask, what is a good PE ratio? That is also a great question. Maybe a topic for another video, but let's just say that every company and every industry is different. So we often use PE ratios to compare one company to another in the same industry. You can't take a brick and mortar retail shop like Kohl's and compare the PE ratio of Kohl's to something like AMD. They're not in the same industry, and I wouldn't expect that the PE ratios of retail stores would be in the same category as PE ratios of companies like AMD. So just keep that in the back of your mind. PE ratios vary depending on which industry you're looking at, and they're most useful when you're comparing a company like AMD to its peers. Look up AMD's peers, see what their PE ratios are, and you can get some idea if one of them is overvalued or undervalued compared to each other. And then that starts your process of research to get the answers to why. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below. I am Tony Denaro, and I will see you on the next video.